Hello, Ernest Manning. I've been asked by admin and Myra and Karen to go through some ideas about timetables that we're looking at. The timetable is being looked at in terms of addressing a couple things that staff and students and parents have talked to us about. They basically come under three ideas. The first is longer lunch. Many students, staff and parents feel like there isn't enough time in lunch to get everybody fed. The lines at the cafeteria are too long. There's not enough time for students to get what they need taken care of. The second thing is crowding. Crowding at lunch, which is again partially responsible for the difficulty in getting everybody fed, is that it takes too long to get through the lunch lines, and that's part of that. The third element that we're trying to accomplish is to just think more creatively about what our class schedule could look like that is best for students, teachers, and creates just a more effective work schedule. Now, it's important to note that these are all just draft ideas. Nothing is being acted upon or moved forward with, but they are draft ideas that we want to get feedback from the staff on so that we know what ideas float and which ideas sink. So let me take you through a couple of them here. The first idea is a timetable much the same as we currently have. What we've changed is we've made lunch a little bit longer just to hopefully accommodate more students and make it a little more flexible. Other than that, the days remain the same. Where do those extra minutes come from? The end of the day just gets pushed by a little bit to accommodate the extra minutes in the lunch. From here on out, the schedules get a little bit more interesting, possibly harder to understand. If you have any questions, please feel free to come and talk to Ms. Marchuk or myself, and we're happy to go through them. So timetable 2 is a flexible table that would have some pretty significant changes. One of the things that we tried to do in this schedule is to break up our lunch seatings into 3 different lunch seatings so that we don't have the same crowding, as well we don't have the same sort of audience for goofiness that can sometimes happen at lunch, especially around Christmas break or summer break. So instead of there being 1 lunch sitting, there are now 3 lunch sittings, so our entire lunch block kind of goes for about an hour and a half. To make up that extra time, we've now placed tutorials in the rotation. And these tutorials would be more mandatory, that students wouldn't necessarily have the same choice, thus making sure that students are actually going to tutorial and not to lunch if they're in grade 10. So there are some things that we might have to do differently around that. So the Monday schedules, Monday and Wednesday schedules, would look like this. The Tuesday, Thursday schedules would basically be the same general structure, except that the classes would swap so that we get each grade and each class getting the same amount of time in the same specific areas. The tutorials would be moved to midday, and the tutorials would be specific to the classes that they were surrounding. Or one of the ideas is that the tutorials would be specific to the classes that they were surrounding, so that each class would be up against a tutorial once per week. Timetable 3. This is basically a reworking of timetable 2, except we don't want lunch to last too long. So instead, we've broken it into only 2 lunch periods, and we have the grade 11s and 12s eating at the same time, and students who are in grade 10 being on a separate lunch. So it's not quite as separated as before, but we don't have the same sort of length of lunch for the kitchen to have to worry about, and we don't have the same gapping. Another issue around these ones with tutorials is that your students might not have the same tutorial as you have assigned based on your class schedule. They most likely would if you were mainly a grade 10 teacher or mainly a grade 12 teacher, some combination thereof, but it wouldn't necessarily happen. So other teachers in the department might have to fill in for some students. Lunch is still 30 minutes, but we have flexibility on either side of that to allow students more time. This schedule here has 3 lunches again, but is now broken down into a slightly different arrangement so that your 3 different lunches happen over longer blocks. Each lunch is around a 55-minute block, and it corresponds to a 55-minute class time. What this means is that if I'm looking at period 1, I would have a long day on Monday, a short class on Tuesday, a long day on Wednesday, a short class on Thursday. So we'd alternate between our 45-minute classes and 55-minute classes. You still have the same number of minutes in a day or in a week. They are just alternating. This does possibly make it difficult for lesson planning, although it also might make it more effective for classes going off-site or for labs or for longer tests without the same sorts of interruptions that we currently have. So each class gets 2 long and 3 short because your Friday schedule would be a 55-minute class in each of the 4 sections. So each week you would get 2 hour 45 blocks and 3 55-minute blocks. This does work out where, again, there would be 3 different lunches, so not a lot of crowding, and a longer time for lunches. The one gap that we would have is that no student could be taking both a math or a 10-level class and a 30-level class without having a correspondence problem. Grades 10 and 20 level classes are fine together, or 20 and 30 level classes are fine together, just not 10s and 30s. Timetable 5 is a similar timetable to timetable 4, except that the lunch periods are alternating in an hour-and-a-half long blocks. So we now have 5 blocked classes, each of which is 72 minutes. You would be timetabled into one of 2 lunch periods. So you'd either be given lunch A or lunch B. Whenever you were opposite of your lunch, you would be in a period 3 class block. Friday stays the same, and tutorial stays in the morning in the schedule as well. There is 5 now blocks, and again, you could get 1, 2, 3, 4 and be done at 2:45 without a lunch, or you could have 1, 2 lunch, 4, 5. So there's all sorts of flexible thinking we can do around that. With a J block in the early morning for classes that would like to meet then, and a J block in the afternoon for classes like robotics or sports med or things like that, where it fits outside of the student's day. Band. Timetable 6 is very similar to our current timetable, except that we've got 2 possible lunch hours on either side of period 3. So period 3 would have 2 different start times depending on which day. So you'd have a lunch and then period 3, or you'd have period 3 and then lunch, and it would just depend on which class you had scheduled when. Again, it would alternate, so 3s and 4s wouldn't always have the same period having lunch. It would scan back and forth whether you were a lunch A person or a lunch B timetable. Lastly is our timetable 7, aptly named because this actually has 6 classes. So we would have 6 shorter classes over the course of the day. So our class times now are 71-minute blocks, and then the cafeteria would be open for 2 blocks, probably something like 3 and 4. And so some students could be programmed classes 1 through 4. Some students could be programmed classes 3 through 6. Some students could have a really nice long middle afternoon nap and go 1, 2, 5, 6. So the timetable would be really, really flexible. One of the things that this would possibly allow is double blocks for quarter systems instead of semestered. So we could have a class that meets here for a double block, or here for a double block. Wherever the double block was, it met that way all the way through from September to November and writes the November diploma exam, or from February to April and writes the April diploma exam. So we could have classes that are taught quarterly with longer classes instead of semestered classes with shorter classes. Lots of flexibility here for things like band and robotics. Lots of interesting flexibility for teachers and other staff based on the way that these blocks would be set up. So those are all of our possible arrangements. I will send out the Word document as well with the blocks. So if you want to go back and look at any of those possibilities, we'll have those available to you. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to come talk to Karen or I, and we'd be happy to share our thinking or explain better some of the ways these things can be happening. We will have time on Friday at PLC meetings, if possible, to talk about these options with departments and look at which things work better, or solicit as much feedback as we can get from teachers, and then move ahead to whatever the next steps in that process are. Thank you very much. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.